Task Force. Appreciate your participation. We've got a number of things on the agenda today that we want to cover, particularly our upcoming outreach and some of the feedback that we've gotten. We do want to hit on kind of the layout, some general templates for the report, so we have some consistency there and have some discussions related to that. See where we're at with any questions that might be related to social and environmental justice and weaving that aspect into the report, and then cover some discussion on next steps and our future meetings as we kind of move into this second phase of the State Water Plan Task Force. And do apologize, I need to, if we're not done by about 11:20, I do need to step out, but I know that Wes and Tara are in good shape to continue us through the agenda at that point as well. Just in a general comment, I guess, as we get into this next agenda here in the next phase of the State Water Plan, where we're trying to develop some recommendations and create that spotlight on the issues that we identified. I guess I would encourage folks to think of this next phase really as a strategic plan. And it's maybe more in the front of my mind because I've been engaged in working on a strategic plan for the Illinois DNR these last few months. But really that's what the State Water Plan becomes, is to outline those goals and objectives and recommend strategies for implementation. So when we talk about perhaps in your focus area and your issue, maybe the need for new legislation or the need for setting policy for some programmatic changes that are necessary, I just want to remind folks that the State Water Plan in and of itself does not set that policy or does not create that legislation, but really puts the spotlight on it and becomes that recommendation. Recommend that this policy, be changed for these reasons, or recommend that, this legislation be proposed or introduced. So I think, and we might get into this in some of the outreach feedback that we have. I believe there are some stakeholders out there that believe that this State Water Plan perhaps has more power than it maybe really does. That it sets policy, or that it becomes a governance official document from that perspective, and in a way it does, but it really is that plan. It's the State Water Plan, and so I look at it from again, a strategic planning side that says, okay, here's the issues and spotlight that we want to put on these issues, and these are what we as a State Water Plan Task Force have identified as priorities as we see the world of water in the state of Illinois in 2021. And then based on that, then we as the task force have this report out that recommends that the spotlight stay on this or that, and or that these actions be considered going forward, both from a near-term perspective, what can we do, in the next few weeks or months, and what is going to take us perhaps the entire scope of the next 5 years to work on to get to an end point on an issue or setting new policy. So just want to make that kind of a general statement as we begin, and as part of our focus and our mission while we're creating these specific recommendations in the section that we would share. So with that kind of concludes my welcoming remarks and comments that I had. And I'll turn it back over to Wes or Tara to take us through the agenda here. Thank you. Any questions about that?
Lauren, this is Laura Kiefer. I agree with that overview, and it's looking back at the 84 plan. that's essentially what it was. The shorter document was a strategic plan, and in the following years, these much more involved, taking a spotlight, critical issue, and really digging into the meat of things, and where like-minded folks or people who needed to be at the table, really did those deep dives, and then came up with, some really hard, firmer recommendations on what should occur next, and possible budgets and things like that. So, it seems to me really that, like you said, this is a strategic plan, kind of a plan of how are we going to focus a more deeper look into any of these issues that are going to require much more attention and in-depth look by all interested parties at that point. And then that's then where maybe the rubber meets the road. Would you imagine that that would be the next steps?
Yeah, thank you for that, Laura.
Mhm.
Hey, Laura, this is Wes. I just kind of confirmed that, yeah, that is the intention, is that we'd lay out this plan. And then, for the following 5 to 10 years would be kind of when we implement those recommendations and try to pass that legislation or make the change in the program. Is there any other comments or questions on that? All right, with virtual meetings, I hear you have to wait a little longer, make sure everybody double unmutes and everything. So we'll go ahead and get moving on to the May public outreach as I advance the slide here, which we should say. So as we've talked about before, we're looking at having our May public outreach. We have the dates listed here on the slide of May 18th at 6 p.m., May 19th at 2 p.m., and May 20th at 10 a.m. So kind of a similar format to what we had last time. We reversed the order just to have it work a little better in schedules. Last time, I believe myself, Tara, Steve, and Brian hosted the breakout Q&A sessions, and I was just checking. I wanted to confirm with Tara and Brian. I see and Steve. I'm not sure if Steve is on, but I just wanted to see if these times at least worked for those individuals to be able to host those breakout Q&A sessions similar to last time. Again, we'd probably have the same grouping as last time, but Tara, Brian, and Steve, if you're on, can you guys comment to your availability?
Tara's available.
Wes, this
Thanks.
is Brian. I'll have some difficulties with the May 19th and 20th time periods there. If someone else is willing to lead at least those two, I'd appreciate it. If not, I'll just have to go mobile with my phone and try to do it on the move.
Okay, Brian, we can reach out and see. I'm trying to remember what other topics were in that session, but I can coordinate with those individuals and see about if they can cover you for the May 19th or 20th, or if they just want to cover all three just to make it simplified. And Steve, are you on? I'm not seeing you in the list, but I do see an additional call in. Steve Altman. Okay, I will follow up with Steve.
Hey, Wes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, I see you in the participation list. You said you may have had some conflicts with these times, Steve.
Let me take a quick look here.
And you can let me know and we can follow up. I don't have to know right this moment, but I just need to kind of start giving an idea of who we're going to have host these Q&A sessions. So for everybody else, just kind of check your calendars, see if these are available. Hopefully you can make at least one, but if possible, make all three. I think they were beneficial. And we got some good feedback and just kind of allowing ourselves to have that open discussion with the general public on these topics. With that, we intend to have the same exact format as the phase 1 outreach, which means that we'll have a pre-recorded presentation. Again, Lauren and I will work on developing kind of a, here's where we're at to date on the progress. Then we'll include the issues slide, which I will ask each issue lead to make sure they get to us. We'd like those by May 7th so that we can post it shortly thereafter, well in advance of the 18th, 19th, and 20th Q&A session. We'd like to have those slides limited to about 2.5 minutes. I mean, with 12, 13 topics, that's going to put us close to, 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how long in just that. And then we'll have a little bit of a brief discussion at the end about, the future schedule of the state water plan. So again, similarly, just like last time, send me a PowerPoint slide with the audio embedded in it. You can record that straight from the PowerPoint slide. If you have any questions, I can walk you through that. Actually, I can show you here real quickly. Let me see here if I can get it. There we go. So in slideshow, you can go record from slide, and then you can actually record audio and then just send me that slide. Is the best way to probably do that. That way I can gather them all and export all as a video. So is there any questions about the May public outreach, what we expect? Again, this will be covering our recommendations we have for each section. So I'll give you guys a minute to unmute and raise any questions you have.
And this is Tara, and I was just wondering, I realize we only have 2.5 minutes, but we are developing more. Will you have a template or a guideline of how many slides we can have?
I think
you'd like
before
to
we
see
were
on
trying
there?
to keep it to one, but I don't know if we have to do that. Any thoughts on that? I mean, I guess as long as the duration is okay. We just don't want to have a 10-minute issue. And then, if everybody did that, we'd be talking about a 2 to 3 hour presentation. So I think as long as we're within that 2.5 minutes, if you want to have multiple slides, that's fine.
Yeah, this is Lauren. I would agree that, delivering the message and getting the content out there, if it takes more than one slide, then that's the way it should be. Again, just having the focus be on the duration more than the number of slides.
So this is BJ Murray with IDOT. Just for clarification, so this 2.5 minute presentation is going to be the issues and recommendations, or just the issues?
This is going to be focusing on the recommendations. So phase
Okay.
1 was kind of listing the issues, and this phase 2 outreach is going to be focusing on the recommendations.
Okay.
So you may briefly restate what the issue is if it kind of ties into that recommendation, however you want to present that. But the main focus is going to be, this is what we're recommending in the plan at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is Lauren, just like we did with the issues, I think we present them as draft recommendations. Here's where we're at, in May. stakeholders, this is an opportunity to voice in if you think that there's a recommendation that should be there that wasn't, or you have a major concern about a recommendation, draft recommendation that's there, or you would like to see a draft recommendation expanded further. That's, I think, the purpose of the outreach is to put up a draft of some of these thoughts and recommendations in front of folks before they become final. So that's more the third outreach is when we do here's kind of the final and here's how we're shaping up into a report. So that would be yet to come. So this one is kind of that, here's our initial thoughts, here's our initial drafts of recommendations, seek your input. Thank you.
Open up for any other comments or questions. Okay, hearing none, again, I'll just kind of restate, if you can get those to me by May 7th, I would appreciate it. That way we can begin compiling what will be a video upload similar to last time. So we appreciate if you can do that. All right, I guess we will move on to feedback from the outreach. I guess this is a point of discussion we wanted to have, kind of discuss if the methodology that was used last time was adequate for obtaining feedback. One thing that Laura and I discussed was the possibility of just having direct email sent to the lead individual if they have any recommendations. I think we've gotten some feedback that maybe some people felt like they were being heard. I don't know if that is kind of a deficiency in the survey. So our thought was potentially just having them directly contact the lead and copying a inbox for documentation purposes. So an OWR inbox plus the lead individual would be emailed for any comments they have, and that way it can be addressed by the individual. And again, we just kind of wanted to open this up to the task force members to see what your thoughts are on this. Is it better to do a survey? Is it better just to have a direct email from individuals? Any thoughts on either of those two methods?
Do we have to have an either or? I mean, some people may be more comfortable with a survey versus a direct connect.
We can do both. I guess the question would then be, if we do a survey, would it just be what's your thoughts on the recommendations of these issues? I think it'd just be a way to essentially convey the same information. Unless anybody, again, has any other recommendations of what needs to be included if we were to conduct another survey, if there's specific questions we would need to ask. But ultimately, I guess we saw this as a feedback on the recommendations as it pertains to each specific issue or critical topic.
Hi, Wes. I guess my inclination would be to do both. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm getting inundated with surveys now, have been for months now. And so I often won't respond to them. But on the other hand, sending out saying specifically we are going to have a survey shows that we want input. People could still email us directly, but so they could still do whichever they want. But a survey shows that we're making a real effort to reach out. or visible effort, I should say.
Would you recommend, I guess, to the group, would we just want a survey saying, please provide your comments on issue number 1, which includes these recommendations, provide your comments below. And then second question would be issue number 2 is this with the following recommendations, provide your comments below. Or is there anything more specific we believe we would need out of this survey?
I like the idea of adding the recommendations because then it restates, people don't have to worry about their notes or, I don't know, maybe there's a document, a summary or something that they can download, but it puts it front and center to them. And yeah, with the open-ended question, but it's possible any of the subcommittees might have an additional specific question. Otherwise, just the open-ended question for each one would probably suffice.
So what I would then need from each of you is the list of what your recommendations are, probably by that May 7th again timeline, so that I can create the survey and gather that all out so that it can be released along with the pre-recorded video.
This is Lauren. I guess one thing I would add into there if we're doing that kind of a survey as well, and I guess I envision it being similar to our first one. I'm not sure it's going to be bilingual because I don't know if we have time to prepare it bilingual or not, but that we would have then, a set period. So it becomes like a vehicle to provide written comments during a comment period. I would, I guess, maybe as part of that survey, if we're putting stuff in writing, ask a specific question perhaps on this. How do you see or I'm trying to think out loud here, but yeah, kind of how do you see including environmental or social justice in these recommendations, or do these recommendations consider social and environmental justice? That way we've kind of asked those interested in looking at that want to make sure that we've looked at social and environmental justice, kind of putting it back on the people doing the survey. How does this do that? If not, how could that, what recommendations or comments do you have that would improve that?
So have multiple questions for each issue. One, just general comments, and then another one specific to social and environmental justice, and maybe a third one specific to climate change, or is there any other cross-cutting type topic that we want included for all the 13 issues?
Well, and maybe that just becomes a question: are there, comments that would relate to all the above, or give that as an option in the survey? Do you
And
have
just
a general
remind them to,
yeah.
Any other thoughts? Okay, hearing none, it sounds like we're all in agreement that we should go ahead and prepare a survey while also making emails available. And I will put that together, but I guess my ask for all you issue leads is ensuring that I get a PowerPoint slide that's about 2.5 minutes or less of audio, along with a list of your recommended recommendations to include in the survey. It's likely going to be, or it should be included in your slide, but just having that as a separate Word document so I can make sure I'm stating it correctly how you would like it stated in the survey. Does anybody have any issues with that? Again, we're looking at the May 7th, so I think that's about 2.5 weeks out or so. Speak now or hold your peace. Okay, well, it sounds like we'll be asking for that on May 7th. I'll send out reminders the week of to have that pulled together. But if you could please make a note on your calendars to get that information, and that can just be emailed to me. If it's too large of a file, I think the state has the FTP site that we can transfer large files, but hopefully I don't think the audio file would be that large. So if you have any problems or issues with that, just reach out to me. You guys should all have my email address.
So Wes,
Okay.
and maybe this will come up, this may come up in discussion of our scheduling here, but then what kind of a due date would we put on that survey?
I think we would just have it wrap up with the ending of the public comment period, which we have notified on the schedule. So I think we have the public comment period going into late June, I believe. So that's the opportunity for them to provide comments back to us.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next, I think we wanted to take a moment just to discuss kind of the general report layout, and Tara McParlin has done an awesome job kind of putting some examples together for us. I just wanted to kind of show these off and get some opinions, so I'm going to exit out of here, and I'm going to have a few templates I'm going to show. So as you will see on my screen, they're labeled with a 3, a 7, and 10. Tara has actually put these together, up to 10 of these together. We weeded it down and selected 3 we wanted to share with you. And so these should be coming up now. Don't worry about the text. This is very draft of my water sustainability section. But the main thing is that kind of the format. So you'll see all of these kind of have a similar overview paragraph, what the identified issues are, and then the main difference is the recommendations and how we want to prepare these. I guess, Tara, do you want to comment to any of these as I go through them, or do you want me to show them off?
I think you can, and if people have questions, welcome to it.
Okay, so within this, and you'll see it at the top, it's hiding behind all my stuff, but this is number 3, I believe, yes. Number 3, template number 3, essentially lists the issue next to the recommendation and kind of the general theme of the issue, and then what the recommendation would be to the right of it. So this is kind of one example, and we'll call this template number 3. Again, up to the top, all of these kind of have the same overview, identified issues, statements, and then recommendations that kind of defines or categorizes the issue and lists the recommendation next to it. Okay, that is template number 3. Next, we'll move on to template number 7. Again, you can kind of see the same overview, identified issues, recommendations, and then the recommendation is bolded in this blue line with kind of giving a little bit more detail on who the lead is, if there's any funding needs, and if there's any legislative needs in this. So again, just kind of showing this off, you can kind of see the layout here for template number 7. And feel free to ask any questions as I'm kind of showing these off or after I get done showing them, and we'll be happy to address those. Okay, that's template number 7. The third one is template number 10. Again, we have the overview and the issues and recommendations section. On this one's actually combined a bit. And then here we show kind of a timeline. Again, the issue category, the recommendation. It kind of combines it by adding the lead agency, the funding, and if there's any legislative initiative that goes along with that. The only difference, or one difference, is this changes the orientation of the page to allow it to all fit. So there's a kind of a 5-year set of recommendations and a 10-year set of recommendations on here. So this is just a set of templates. We don't have to use specifically any one of these. This is more of opening up for discussion on the layout of each of these 13 topics that we have. Obviously, there'll be parts of the report before and after explaining the process, but this is more of what we would ask each of the critical issue leads to work with our committee to develop and submit as we finalize the recommendations and move into drafting the report itself. So I'll open it up to comments, questions, preferences to the group.
This is Lauren. I'll start. I like number 10, this one you're showing right now, I think the best because it nicely summarizes some of those quick view, does it require funding or does it require legislation? Who's in the lead? What is it? What's the issue? And what I also like is that it, whether we call it a 5-year, 10-year, or a near term, longer term, I like that kind of a division as well, that kind of sets out, here's something that can be done more quickly, and then here's some of these other things that are not going to happen overnight, that are going to take perhaps additional research or some additional investigation to carry out. The other, I guess, general comment that I would make, and kind of given some of our audience, I really would like to see a picture of some sort, maybe similar to what we've used in some of our outreach PowerPoints, included in that format, maybe with the overview or the issue part, just to add some color and some interest there to highlight what that issue is. Thank you.
This is Sally McConkey. I agree with what Lauren said. I like this template.
Thank you, Sally. Anybody else?
I like the template, the recommendation. I mean, it's as long as the recommendations aren't too long, so that the table doesn't get unwieldy, but unless it needs to. But I suppose if there's further explanation that needs to be for a recommendation, that can be added to a different part of the document or something. But yeah, I like this one too.
Yep, I do too.
Yeah, I think that does bring up a good point, Laura, that there may be a concern of the length of explanation that may be needed with a recommendation. You can see what drafts I have come up with is usually, 2 to 3 sentences, and would we spell out those recommendations in a much greater detail in a separate report, much what we saw with the 1984 effort, where they often publish special reports to kind of provide additional detail if a representative or senator wanted to really hone in or get more details on a specific topic. that would be a possibility to follow up with, or is there concern this would get overwhelmed in detailing the recommendation?
I think as long as the issue is well, has a well-organized narrative before that, it should flow, identifying the issues and stuff, it should then be able to flow into this recommendation summary more easily. That it would
Yeah.
make sense. So, and then again, part of these recommendations might be that a more subsequent, a later report, just like you said, Wes, these more supplemental reports, that recommendation is that there needs to be a deeper dive on this aspect, and we recommend a subcommittee to, work on this in the next 2-3 years or whatever, and then that would then, like you said, flesh out, maybe better what the recommendation would be. So it's what the needs are for that recommendation. So I think let's just see what happens. I think again, the narrative on very nicely articulating what the critical issue is, what the problem is, should help preface such a summary table.
Laura, this is Tara. I like that idea. I was just wondering, how would we denote that in the report if we think maybe spell out which recommendation needs further evaluation? Should we add another column or, highlight it some way? Because obviously all of them are recommendations, but I agree having just a few sentences to describe the recommendation is a challenge. Does this mean all of these would be additional studies? Probably not. It might be nice to know which can move ahead without further study just as is. I'm not sure.
It might come down to that, there's, maybe, some of the critical issues need to have further study, but that's for the longer term, maybe not so much the nearer term. And then maybe that becomes, more of a discussion or further, overarching recommendations at the end of the document, saying here are the critical issues that were identified that need further study, type of thing, and picking it out of the other recommendations and highlighting there. We do some highlighting of what needs further study before any actions can be recommended. Something like that, but it would still be included in this recommendation table, but then it would be highlighted in a conclusion or something of the overall plan document.
I like the idea of having it near term, long term, and maybe we just define what long term means. It could mean if a recommendation is in long term that additional research or study or collaboration is required before a specific action can be taken.
Yeah, I like that.
Could we just make a recommendation that a further report will be developed on said topic?
Yeah, that sounds like a good approach to point people to more detailed documents. I do think the lead agency will also answer part of the question Tara brought up on which group is identified as specific lead will, I think, naturally break into research versus different types of implementation versus different communities.
Yeah, and even a long-term recommendation for, further investigation, would still be listed who would be the lead agency or supplemental agencies and what kind of funding would be needed or things like that. Because anything on a deeper dive with current resources just isn't going to be possible. So if you substantiate further investigation or further just efforts to be able to come up with actionable items is again a recommendation itself that needs some resources to do. So it's still, yeah, part of those long-term recommendations. So it fits nicely.
One,
Right
I
now,
guess,
go ahead, Lauren.
I would just a quick comment, mostly because I had the benefit of seeing some of Tara's other options here, but in this kind of a table format, I did like where we kind of alternated the shading, you know, and so on this one maybe it becomes let's just say a lighter blue on row number 2, or a lighter gray and then a little darker. Just it helps. Kind of when we alternated those, it helps that table just visually to kind of see or make a distinction between those. That was just more of a visual formatting comment. Yeah, something to that nature.
Hi, this is Yifeng. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we.
Hi, thank you. I think this table is just so clear to lay out the key information on this, and it's really efficient. However, I think there's also one key component we are missing due to the nature of the table listing is the connection of the issues. So for example, it sounds like each issue is really clear and brief, identify what's the recommendation, what's the leading agent, those information. But also a lot of issues, they connect to each other. So if there's a way we can somehow show the issues is not just individuals, they also connect to each other and emphasize the ripple effect when they combine together. I think that might be even more powerful, and use this kind of connection as a emphasize why they are so important on this. So one way we might be able to do this is probably have some kind of like a network diagram in the very end, and somehow kind of each issue, just the topic, and have a circle and try to like a spider web connect them to show they are not just separate. Actually, we as a group, we think these issues and we discuss these issues. It's not just individually, and we also have overall thought of this. So just my 2 cents to share. Thank you.
Yufeng, I was thinking the exact same thing, and that way we could also illustrate any of the cross-cutting issues like climate change, things like that. So it needed an illustration.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because when you connect those dots, and maybe that line is another issue, which it could be further study, which we are not really stress at this moment, or that might be able to provoke some thought in the future. And this kind of spider web kind of structure could be 2D, or even we can make it 3D, 3-dimensional type of the work on that. So, but it doesn't need to be really complicated. If we put a lot of information there, that would be really messy.
I think that's kind of where things will come in together too, and that we would also identify what recommendations are in common between the issues, and that would be a point of, future collaboration and pulling together resources as well. So not only how the issues are connected, but how are the recommendations overlapping.
I really like that concept. I guess, would it be better to kind of have one of those with each issue as part of that chapter, or would it serve better in the introduction, or serve better as more of conclusions after people have been through these chapters, so to speak? How do you see that having the most impact?
I think it should be at the beginning, because then it sets the stage for everybody to understand how these things are connected. So while they're reading, they can be looking for those connections.
So I have a kind of a question. I'm trying to visually understand this as we're discussing it. And the first thought I had popped in my head was that we'd have the 13 topics across the top with all the recommendations kind of in circles or something down below and lines drawing to all those that are somewhat connected. Is that what's kind of thought, kind of creating the spider web? And if so, I don't know if we'd want to have the recommendations at the very beginning of the report. I guess it may be better to maybe have someone propose a example of what this may look like and share it for the next meeting, or
Well, Wes, I mean, really what I was thinking is not at the beginning, spider webbing the recommendations, actually just spider webbing how the critical issues are connected and feed into one another. And then near the end of the document is where you would then find, what are the overlaps and interconnections of the recommendations. So it'd be two separate ones, in my thinking. And I wouldn't mind if Yufeng and we could probably scratch out, something, drafty, it wouldn't be comprehensive by any means, but just to give an example of maybe what those might look like.
Thank you for that volunteered effort. I was about to
I
volunteer
volunteered Yufeng too, so.
Go ahead.
Happy to help. It just, I'm still scratching my head on what exactly this concept can be a best way to represent. To be honest, I don't have that picture in my head yet. I just think about the connection between the issues are very important.
Yeah, I think there's a few of us that can get, Dave, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I really like the idea of having one in the beginning that addresses what was going to be my concern, that for the climate change issue, it affects a lot of the other issues or all of the other issues. So it would be a little challenging to, how do I illustrate that if I were to have a single figure for just climate change chapter or section. So, so having one at the beginning allows for a description of how all these, not individual little small issues as listed here, but the main chapters, the main issues, how they connect is really important.
Yeah, I know I'm kind of volunteering, but I think I'll tap other people. And again, nothing comprehensive, but just sitting down with just paper and pencil and just thinking how this actually could come about. It sounds like a great idea, whether it actually can culminate into something useful and not complicating matters more, I'm not sure. So I think maybe just some broad exercises to find out if something, would actually be worthwhile.
Yeah, I think that's worth pursuing, and I don't know that that's something we have to have for our May outreach even.
Oh, no.
I mean, if we did, great, but I don't see it. I think we can take some time to really look at some examples and think through that, because I think it would add value to the report in a big way. And my final comment would be that I want to put integrated water management on the top and then just stick it in my part of the report.
Yeah, Lauren, I think this would be a good piece of information to share with that third outreach as we're kind of finalizing the report and kind of showing kind of maybe how this is all coming together, maybe a good topic of discussion for our third outreach effort. So just in summary, I'm hearing that everybody is on board with using this current template kind of being shown. I made a few minor changes talking about short-term versus long-term, formatting the table. These little things can be further tweaked. If anybody has any comments on that, you can send it to me. Additionally, I don't think we'd talk about connection within this table, but that would be a separate image or exhibit at both the beginning and the end of the report. And Laura was going to kind of spearhead that with Yufeng as well, in coming up with what that would look like. I guess a question I have for the group is, right now we show lead agency funding and legislation as the 3 columns after the recommendations. Do we think we need to show all 3 of these? Do we need a 4th one? Is there any information that should be included or excluded from this table? Again, this was just kind of a starting point for discussion.
I was just kind of wondering, that column for legislation, legislation isn't the only option. I'm wondering, could change legislation to action, and then in that column you would list legislation as a possible action? I mean, an outcome isn't always results in legislation, but you guys know better about this document and who might want to have that more highlighted or not. I don't know, something like that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I support that thought. I like that.
Would that be maybe make that column applicable to adding a comment that further study is needed?
Yeah, that'd be one of the actions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that would kind of cover both of those. It would cover our the earlier concerns about identifying where additional study is needed before we could plan actions. Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted. So similar to kind of what I'm showing right now as I update this report or this template, I assume you all can see this. I've changed that to action. And it can be legislation, a program activity, a new study. We can kind of maybe discuss what these could be and maybe a little bit of consistency as we go from each of the 13 critical issues. But is this kind of what everybody has in mind as we receive those comments?
I think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As long as the detail is somewhere else, right?
Well, that kind of runs into the crux of this is this table going to be sufficient in explaining what needs to be done or giving direction on where we're going from here? Is the recommendation cell going to be enough to identify this, but this just kind of identifies what category the recommendation falls under as far as moving forward or implementation?
I'm not sure I know what you mean, Wes.
Well, Walt questioned whether or not we would have enough detail in here. So
Well, I'm wondering
again,
if we treat this table as just maybe just a summary of the previous material. I know I talked about, the issues section. If you scroll up, where the text is, there was issues and recommendations. I know we're trying to keep the text down a little bit, but maybe this is where we get into more of a narrative of the recommendations, and we just look at the table as a nice, easy way to summarize what was just stated in a little more detail above it. So we just treat it as a summary table of the discussion above it.
So you're stating that we should have a full recommendation narrative.
Possibly. I don't know if that's what Walt was thinking, maybe.
Well, I'm just thinking somewhere we've got to say how we're going to meet these recommendations, right? Maybe that's outside the water plant itself. But I mean, you look at that first recommendation, prioritize services to low-income communities, but there's, how are you going to do that? You know, what actual metrics can determine if we meet that recommendation?
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I
think
don't think we want to jump in the details of us identifying, for example, prioritizing services to low-income communities. I don't think we want to say, well, we're going to look at this percent of minorities and this percent of income or something like that and spell out all those details here. I don't think that's the intent of this report. You know, could you do it in a separate report? You know, how do you show that? That's all good questions, but you know, I don't think we can put in every single detail without having every recommendation almost being a 5-page write-up.
And I think that's where these these subsequent reports come in, and just that, okay, you know, maybe identifying, I mean, you've identified lead agency, but maybe, you know, you're looking at, you know, other, other social oriented agencies in the state to partner with, and the recommendation is then, you know, that group gets together and discuss how do you do this, and then creating the implementation steps then.
Well, I'm not even sure, say, for example, number one, I don't know if I need a separate report to spell out how we're prioritizing low-income communities, but in the details or the documents that we'll provide as we implement this, we'll have that information. So if somebody asks me, how are you defining these low-income communities or something, I would be able to provide that. But I don't know if it needs that level of detail in a report somewhere.
You know, and that's probably a good question for our outreach, right? For those that want to see. I'm sure that there's some out there that are going to want, you know, 10 pages on every issue, but also to me, this creates many of these items might create a white paper or a report or a white paper that goes into those details that aren't part of this plan or not included in the plan, in the plan report.
Just going to make a brief comment. Hey, Steve, I think we're getting quite a bit of feedback from your mic. Would you mind just muting in between talking just so that we don't get that feedback? Thanks. Appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Was there any other comments on the table here? I think we'll heed Lauren's advice about maybe asking for that detail in the public outreach. Anybody have any other thoughts or comments on the table?
No, actually, I think the table is great. I do have a general question, though. We've been using the word issue for both these specific issues listed here, but also in the main large sections, unless that's changed. I'm getting confused about what is meant by issue. Are we using different terms for those now?
No, Dave, it's probably just my oversight. I think what maybe we should say is the 13 topics or the 13 critical topics may be better. And I'm guilty of this probably more than anybody, and confusing that with the issue, which is included for each of those 13 topics have multiple issues. So I apologize. I'll try and use the word topic or critical topics as we talk about those 13 topics we have leads on.
And that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I was using consistent terms. So thank you.
Yeah, so noted. I need to be better about it. I will try and do that, David. Thank you. Any other points of discussion before we move on to our next point?
Yes, this is Tara, and it's not necessarily for the table, but our committee had some questions that they wanted me to ask the task force really about when we're developing these recommendations. And one thing that's come up is some of the issues that we have are currently funded, but we want them to be expanded or provide new service. So we just were curious in this, if something is already funded through an agency and that work's being done, we don't, but they're very important and we need that funding to continue. Do we need to address that as a recommendation in this report?
I think that there's a concern that it would, that it needs to expand beyond status quo, or a concern that it would be terminated for some reason, then I think it's worthy of mentioning in the report. It's a strategic plan. It's an opportunity to spotlight. And so if there's something that, might even be an amazing program, but it just isn't going far enough, then that's something that should be spotlighted, to use that term, in this plan, to say, yeah, it's already there, it's so good, but it's just not going far enough, or could go further for the benefit of the state of Illinois.
Okay, that helps, thank you. And then the second or last question was, do we need to actually give a range of funding or an approximate funding? Is that going to help the General Assembly have an idea of what I don't know, but that was brought forward at our committee, and we didn't know if we needed a column or information to actually say what kind of funding we're talking. I know we're talking annual, one time, but do we need to say, is it 5 million? Is it 1 million? Is it 75 million?
That seems like a reasonable detail to me, but.
Yeah, I would recommend that if it's kind of ballpark is available to provide it. If not, the recommendation may need to be including is determining the cost. I see there being a great benefit to having a dollar value there in that funding column.
A devil's advocate, it might freak them out. So that's what we were concerned about. And once something's in writing, would we be held to that? It adds complexity to developing our recommendations.
Well, it is a recommendation. So if you have a range, or again, to define a ballpark, where we're talking, 1,000, a million, or 100 million, that probably is a valid point to give some idea of magnitude.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo Lauren's comment is that, if we're talking about the benefits and what the benefits of doing these recommendations are, I think they need to be weighed against, well, what is that cost? I mean, can we do 20 recommendations in this section compared to one recommendation in another section at the same cost? Well, I think having that order of magnitude or ballpark figure can help establish priorities.
And that's all I had from our committees. Thanks for addressing.
I guess one last question I have for the group is, do we feel like we need to expand this issues and recommendations section to include all of this detail and then some, and just use this as a summary table that could be as an appendix? Or, you know, if we're doing that, we're looking at, you know, 5 to 6 pages per issue if we're trying to include this in the main body and expand the details in this issues and recommendations section. As you can see, I have 2 very short paragraphs here that doesn't talk anything of what is included in this table. Do we want to duplicate this information in the narrative and put this as an appendix, or also just in the report as a summary? And again, it's how lengthy do we want each of these sections to be?
Well, in your example, Wes, what were you discussing that was separate from the table there in your issues and recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of more just a few statements regarding the current issues. And it really didn't even hit all the issues that are mentioned below. It just kind of gave more of an introduction into what the issues and recommendations were going to be specified below. So here we talk about sustainability and the ability to plan and stuff, but it makes no mention of, you know, recommendation 1 being social inequity, and social inequity isn't even mentioned up here. It's just kind of talking more broadly about, it's kind of more of a transition from the overview to the recommendations. It doesn't include the details.
Hey, Wes, I'm wondering, you know, we're trying to keep it to sort of 2-ish pages total per critical topic. But I mean, would it be a problem to let each topic have 2 pages of text plus the table? Then I think that would give people room to, if they want, have enough room to add some particular detail that probably, you know, needs to help support a summary that's in the of the recommendations in a table, so that you could have up to 2 pages of text plus recommendations table.
Well, and to be honest, Laura, that's kind of where we started when we started putting these templates together, is that was all text. And then we thought, well, to kind of make it a little bit easier to follow, we kind of converted that text to the table. So I guess that's a conversation for the group. Is it better just to be concise with the table, or, you know, do we want to have that duplicated information?
I don't think duplication is bad necessarily. But as we have looked at this layout, I think what the top one was overview. Is that what and then maybe this next one is, yeah, we had overview of what is this topic? Why is this one of the 13? I guess that's what I see the overview explaining. And then the next one is that issues. And so that's what we kind of helped define up to this point. Here were the issues under that topic. Maybe we have issues instead of issues and recommendations. Maybe that's issues and justice or something. And if we need to talk about how we're weaving in social or environmental justice into these, and then the recommendations are in that tabular form. And I guess if necessary, maybe even you know, a recommendation could have a footnote or something if there really needs to be more explanation given to that recommendation than you know, making a whole row fill an entire page. Maybe there is a footnote section below that table that again adds some additional comment or something. So I think this middle section, the issues should be that reiteration of the issues that we discussed during our last outreach and the issues we defined, and maybe leave the recommendations part out of this section.
I like that idea.
So in this issues section under there, are we just going to list, like up from our slide, our 5 or 6 sub or main issues? Because I don't think that would be very useful, but if we have a discussion narrative about each of the 6 issues, that might make sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see it as the latter.
Yeah. And I still think, you know, it's possible that, you know, even with, you know, the overview and issues, you know, I don't, and then if if we're trying to keep the entire topic to 2 pages, I think that's still difficult. I think if we could let each group, you know, dealing with their topic, that they can have at least up to 2 pages of text if they desire, plus then a recommendations table, and that text would be, you know, the overview and a narrative of the issues. They don't have to, but that would be the text limit,
Yeah.
plus a table.
I think that's reasonable.
And then, you know, the recommendation, like Lauren said, if you need more room, you know, a footnote, you know, to that recommendations table.
Yeah, I like how all this is going. This is Tara, because I was struggling myself in our committee. We have, it's if you shorten the recommendation too much, it really leaves it open to interpretation. And even within our group, we start arguing over what does that one sentence even mean anymore. We've shortened it so much. So I think it's good to have an opportunity to explain things a little bit further so that everyone realizes specifically what the issue is. So I think this is all great.
Okay, so it sounds like everybody's kind of on agreement that we can lengthen the text to 2 pages and then however many pages we need for recommendations if we're kind of sticking to 2 or not. I mean, I assume that's what everybody's kind of on board with. And I guess any disagreements with that or any additional topics on the formatting? Okay, hearing none, I will move back to our presentation. And kind of one of our last topics that we're generally going to describe is, since the last meeting, we shared some information on environmental and social justice, and I just wanted to reach out to the group and see if this was adequate for your questions you had on what is environmental and social justice. Do you need additional information? You know, did you have an opportunity to look that over and did answer your questions? So I'll kind of open it up to the group for any comments or questions on the environmental and social justice topics.
This is Yifeng, and so I was waiting for Lauren to take a lead on this one, but I think I can kind of start it on. Lauren and I, we have been doing some discussion, and then Sally McConkey has been providing some information based on her work on the flood planning, and those are very valuable information. For example, from CDC and FEMA, some document on that, and Sally also provide very insightful 1 page to Lauren and me. And but to be honest, this topic is just so big. And then at U of I recently, there are 3 different departments offering the series of webinar. And I've been trying to be most of them, and just kind of this topic can really relate it to the racist issue and the income issues, and also the urban planning issues, and of course, a water resource issue on this. And then another directions Water Resource Center is taking is we just initiate a new project working with business school and to study the ESG accounting relationship with water resource. And this is kind of new front end of study. We want to see how this kind of the practice in accounting business school. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, if I remember correctly. And also some discussion with Sally is about she has been doing some research work on the resilience index, and which I think could be really useful to connect with the study we just started with business school on that. So that's kind of update I have right now. And regarding the additional information needed, it's just a lot. I cannot really put a very brief list at this moment. So I have to admit, I mean, I'm still in kind of the foggy status right now on how to make a very detailed plan on this. So that's a quick update for everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Lord. Thank you, Yufeng, for that and your engagement in that. I would just share, as I mentioned earlier, you know, I've been working on a strategic plan for the Department of Natural Resources as well. And we've had similar struggles there that, you know, the more you dive into that, it could, the whole plan could almost become a social and environmental justice plan, you know, and so, and then you begin to lose sight of, well, no, the strategic plan was to improve the department, you know, and those things are needed to improve the department, but we started to lose sight of some of our other mission kind of actions in such a strong focus on the environmental and social justice. So I think there's kind of a fine line there, and you have to be careful it doesn't tip too far into that and start to become a different document. But I guess the general comment I would make is that as our final version of this document, or you know what we call the plan, would have enough of that flavor in there that anybody looking at it would see that those issues were considered and made a part of the plan. And so that, and as we continue to do future updates of the plan, that will always remain an aspect of the plan. Thank you.
I kind of agree with you, Fong, in that it's just so overwhelming, and as researchers, you know, you always hope that what you're doing is going to help everyone, but it's kind of, we're missing, I guess, some key members to help us put things together, and it's so daunting that I kind of feel like if I try to identify, you know, what environmental social justice issues pertain to X topic, that if it wasn't adequately covered, then it would reflect badly on the plan because, well, you didn't consider this and you didn't consider that. Whereas, you know, I'm kind of wondering if our environmental and social justice activities would be to just making sure that we have that there's decent participation from the people who have the most at stake, or they're advocates in that, in water, resources issues, because I don't think we can per se pick a social or environmental justice issue and say this is how we're going to deal with it in this particular water resources critical topic. Again, it's just too overwhelming. So it really, I appreciate the material, but it only made me feel like it's just very inadequate as to what level do we do this. It's maybe it's just more of an engagement activity, but still feeling definitely lost as to how much to address this. Not for the lack of wanting to, just don't know where to start and then when to stop. That's my 2
Yeah,
cents.
Laura, I think one of the benefits of maybe will be is as we put out that survey is putting an emphasis on that question of, is this addressing social environmental benefits or considerations in your opinion? And if not, what needs to be included, and kind of put it out there to our stakeholders and constituents to say, did we meet your thoughts on this topic or not?
And we may not. I mean, but we can certainly would be open to hearing what they have to say or their insights. But again, it can be so overwhelming. We may have to say, well, again, that just expanded the plan tenfold by incorporating all of that or something. That's why I kind of like the idea of when we define our issues, that maybe there's some narrative in that piece of the report out that discusses in those kind of general terms how that is influenced on that issue, or additional work that needs to happen to accomplish that. But like Laura's already shared, it can get so overwhelming and so complicated fast. On my own, I wondered about just thinking about, well, let's say the joint permit application required for construction in floodplains. That saying, well, should we be having that in multiple languages? Okay, well, do we do one in Spanish? Or, well, if we're doing one in Spanish, how come we should be doing one in Mandarin or maybe German or Italian? And if we did that, well, then when I look at my own program, I don't have the staff that could read an Italian application, and so it does get complicated very fast when you're trying to be inclusive and all of those kinds of things as well. But I think in a general sense, as we talk about the issues and how in the spotlight of those, and in this next 5-year period or a longer term even beyond that, how those considerations need to be given to those aspects of it. And I think as long as the plan is sharing that we've definitely taken a step forward in the right direction to giving that the right kind of recognition it needs.
Well, this is Yifeng again, and I always like to use an analogy that I've been doing the research is this problem is so complex. And when you have a complex question that kind of sounds chaotic, and the first thing is you want to start with a linear function of it and try to simplify it, to find a linear equation to start with on this. So I think we are really, we have the vision to tackle these really, just like Lauren said, really complicated and really complex issue, and this is not going away. And with our civilization progress, it's going to even more complex and more complicated. So I think right now on this plan, we can try to kind of plan ourselves to delineate the picture, what is supposed, the direction we are going, just the picture, just like Lauren said, the picture there. And then under this picture, we can try to identify, I think, 3 things. One is our strategy. One is the legislation need, and also the development of the tool to address the issue. And development of a tool could be engineering approach, could be financial approach, could be regulation approach of that. So I think by doing that to simplify is partition that picture into 3 or 4 segments, for example, strategy, legislation, and tool development, probably would be more systematic way to think about this, the question we are going to ask during the public outreach event. So just another 2 cents to share. Thanks.
This is Tara. I agree with everything I'm hearing, and obviously we've all been reading more and doing more. There's been a lot of webinars and things, and it is overwhelming. But since I do the minutes of these meetings, I do recall last time we talked that in the beginning of the report, we will be talking about these issues up front, just to do an overview, overall description. And I just wanted to remind everyone that that is the intent. We're not having its own section, but it is going to be introduced as a topic. And then I just wanted to also mention, on our committee, we do have some very good equity representatives, and they brought up this last time, and I just wanted to remind everyone, because she reminded us that for equity, it's related to income, racial, but also ability. And ability is the one I sort of sometimes forget about. So I'm just throwing it out there to all the committee heads, just to remember sometimes you might need to address ADA type ability or those types of recommendations in your section. Thank you.
Yes, at this point, I'll ask if there's any other comments or questions regarding social and environmental justice.
Yufeng, based on some of the webinars that you've gone to on campus about the social environmental justice, is there anybody there that maybe Wes could talk to about framing a good question for the survey? Because sometimes the way and how you phrase and how you ask a question can make all the difference. And that it might be helpful just to put him in contact with somebody you heard speak or something to help frame a question or two on that.
Yeah, not at this point, and because the seminar being, for example, one of the new scholar, and she is really into the connection of the connect with the racial justice, and then she has been working a lot with federal agency and the environmental advocate on that, and that's one. And the other one is in NRES, and she is a faculty really into more like international global philosophy of this. So another one is urban planning, and they are more into how to design and then the urban design philosophy incorporate into this. And also the financial part, business school, is how to make the profit of the company become not the only target, only goal for their company's benefit, the strategic benefit on this. So none of them I haven't heard is really focused on specific water resource or the state scale or community scale of this. And yes, some of them might have really have some advocate activity from bottom up. But again, I still struggle to find any of them to help us on this one yet. So that's why I'm still exploring on this. But good things is when Laura and I start on this, we found IEPA already have a very good kind of summary on the regulation part on social justice of it. It's on their webpage. And that could be a good starting point for us to take a look on how we to design the survey. And maybe, Wes, I don't know, have you seen that page from IPA or not yet, but I'm happy to forward that link to you if that helps. And I think Laura had also visited that page before. Over. But thank you for the suggestion, Laura.
Wes, I put something in the chat. I sent back to you one of those links that you had sent to us. And it had, it was the PDF of a presentation. And there was a professor in there, Lori Peak from University of Colorado at Boulder. I mean, I like that information in there. Maybe you could send her an email and see if she might be able to help with a question or two. Because that seems mostly dealing with water hazards and things of that nature, maybe.
I guess I'll have an ask here, Yufeng or someone. Would you guys be willing to reach out as I'm trying to compile the presentation and compile most of the survey? Would somebody be willing to reach out and make that connection?
Yeah, I think Laura, maybe this is some document is Chesapeake Bay watershed report.
Say what?
And there's also another one, is Delaware watershed, Delaware River watershed. I think those are more like a local scale push. Yeah, thank you for reminding us. This might be also a good starting point to take a look too.
I didn't understand what you were saying, Yufeng, sorry.
Yeah, what I say is, I think you remind me also, we have seen the document, one is from Florida and one is from Delaware, on their water resource related document and related to the environmental justice. And I can share with those two documents too. Thank you for reminding me. I'm sending that link.
I guess, would anybody be willing to reach out to one of their contacts or to this contact that Laura provided to have their input on the survey or a question that we could include for the survey?
I suppose since it was my idea, I can reach out to this Lori Peak. And I'll copy you, Wes.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Any other comments or questions on this topic? Okay, hearing none. Lauren may have had to step off. He said 11:20 was the time that he had to step off. So, Lauren, unless you're there, I'll assume you're not. So I'll just go ahead and proceed on to the kind of wrap up of this. And that is kind of the schedule moving forward. So May 7th is when we've asked for that outreach slide, and that will also now include a Word document or the text that you would like included in the survey as you list out your recommendations. So if you could make sure that's all provided to me by May 7th so I can compile that and start developing the video, which will be uploaded on the website, hopefully shortly thereafter. As you can see, we have the public outreach there on the 18th, 19th, and 20th. I'll be in contact with Tara, Brian, and Steve, and maybe some others to see if we can get somebody to host those breakout sessions. And just make your calendar available if you can, or just note those on your calendar if you are available, to hopefully be able to sit in on those Q&A sessions so that we can provide the public an opportunity to discuss with us directly some concerns or questions they have on our efforts. As you can see, that keeps the public comment period from until June 18th, which is when we will close the public comment period. I will share any survey results we have, and hopefully you should already have an email responses we have from that. If not, I'll forward that to the corresponding lead for those critical topics. Next State Water Plan Task Force meeting is planned for July 14th. So if you could just mark your calendars for that, as well as we will probably be, well, on the next slide, we'll talk about topics to include or discuss in that July meeting. Finalizing the recommendation at the end of August, September State Water Plan Task Force meeting, and then developing the report thereafter with a final public outreach in November. So again, we'll probably have that September meeting to discuss the final public outreach effort in November. So I'll kind of open up. Does anybody have any questions on this timeline that we have laid out? Any concerns? Speak now. Okay, I am not hearing anything, so I assume everybody is good with the schedule. And then the last thing I have is just the next meetings on July 14th. We talked about, Laura and I, about the interest we have in making sure the state water plan is dynamic and updatable, essentially a fluid document, not one that's updated every 20 or 40 years, but one that we can, how do we make it so that it can be updated as new data and activities are underway? And also maybe discussing a little bit about these add-on reports or special reports, which was what they were called in the 1984 efforts, what those should include, maybe talking about those a little bit more in detail. Is there anything else that I'm going to add that we'll talk about that connectivity exhibit? So I'm going to exit here and just add that into the possible agenda. But is there any other agenda items that you feel like we should add for our July outreach? Again, we will just be ending our public outreach for phase 2. So I imagine we'll be talking about phase 2 comments, and then we will talk about the connectivity exhibits. Is there anything else that comes to mind as questions? Again, at this point, we'll be only about 5 months out from publishing the report, ideally. Any other considerations or discussions that we need to have in upcoming State Water Plan Task Force meeting? I'll kind of pause now to let anybody speak up.
Wes, this is Tara, and I noticed that you had sent around comments from some of the organizations about the task force. And I thought we were to talk about that today a little bit, and maybe it was taken off due to time, or I was just curious what the plans were of how we were going to address their comments.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tara. I think I may have just forgot to put that into the agenda slide here, as that came in after this was developed. You know, I did share that. I did get feedback from some of the topic leads that that may not necessarily be an accurate statement that was shared, that, you know, these considerations weren't being included. You know, I think the letter referenced specific topics, and after talking to at least one of those topic leads, you know, they kind of took exception and said, hey, we are actually doing this. So I guess at this point, Lauren and I may follow up with that, with the publisher of that letter, just to kind of find out more details and why they felt that way. But I guess for us, it is just a reminder to make sure that we are accepting that feedback that we are getting from the public, and including that in the report as much as we can. I mean, sometimes some of the requests are not always feasible. Sometimes they're not aware of all the nuances that may go on with the recommendation, and those need to be discussed. But I guess just a word to all the topic leads is that, you know, make sure that you are reviewing those public comments that we are receiving. And sometimes they are, they do have contact information that you could reach out to those individuals for more clarification, more details, or maybe even just a response to that. So again, I think Laura and I will follow up with the entity that submitted that letter to get more clarification. But you know, I think in digging a little deeper, we found that, you know, some of those claims may not be completely accurate. So was there any questions to that letter that was provided to the task force members?
Again, this is Tara. I agree with what you're saying. One that concerned me a little bit was they felt that the public outreach maybe was too technical. And I feel like we're approaching it the same way this time. And I was just curious if the group had any ideas to make it feel a little more welcoming. I felt like it was a great public outreach effort, and I just was curious what other people thought. Is there anything that we need to do to make it more maybe open to suggestions from the public?
I think the hard part is that this is all being done virtually, and I think that if people thought it was kind of a little too technical, it could have been softened with subsequent in-person questions and kind of that, just that human, you know, interaction and give and take could have softened it a little bit. I don't know if this is just, you know, just a victim of having to do virtually or not. I don't know how else we can. I thought it was a good one too. But it's just so hard to know because you can't see anybody. You don't. That's what the hard part is.
Yeah, Lauren, I'll just speak up. That's why we thought that the Q&A sessions were so important to make sure that we can attend and make time for, and why we didn't leave it just as a recorded presentation, but to maybe provide some additional clarification. We have some feedback from highly technical stakeholders that want to dive into those deep details. And we have some individuals where we mention, you know, water sustainability, and, you know, they don't know what that means. And it's tough to balance between the two. So, you know, that's why we provide that opportunity in the Q&A live discussion. And, you know, I don't know about peer groups, it seems like we got much more feedback from the survey than we did from the Q&A sessions. So, you know, again, I think that would be our comment back to them, is that, you know, we have these Q&A sessions for that reason, and to provide that clarification. But what we're dealing with, and a lot of times, is pretty technical information and technical topics. You know, it's hard to talk about climate change and just generalities as it pertains to water issues. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but I think, I guess I'd be open to hearing if anybody has any other solutions to that concern.
I'm fine moving forward. That was something that I was wondering as a group we could brainstorm, but I agree with what both Laura and Wes said. It's the nature of the vehicle at this point, and I think we're all doing the best we can.
Okay, is there any other comments to either the letter that was sent to the group or to the July agenda? If not, I'll assume that you guys are all doing wonderfully. You guys have clear direction on what's needed for May and how we're proceeding forward. So let us know now if there's more clarification that's needed on a topic. We can definitely include it in a future discussion. I'll just pause for another 10 seconds or so to see if there's any final comments. Otherwise, we'll wrap up.
Sorry, this is Tara again. I just wanted to, I'm sure most people are aware that Sally McConkey is retiring at the end of this month, and she's been an active player in the task force and committee, so I just wanted to let the group know that she was retiring and just thank her for all of her contributions so far.
Yeah, Sally's been quiet this week. We haven't.
Thank you, Tara. It's been a wonderful career, and a big part of it is because of the great interactions with OWR and just great group of people. It's just been fantastic getting to know you guys. And I'll be around. Private citizen. I'll be answering that survey.
Well, thank you, Sally. Thank you so much for all you've done for the years, your continued partnership and working with the DNR, and just your contributions to the water resources industry. It's amazing, probably looking back at all that's been accomplished over the years. So you're definitely going to be missed. I'm sure Lauren would have even more to say. But we appreciate your contribution over this time, and while you will be missed, that we hope that we will still be in touch as we move forward through efforts. Okay, with that, I think we're coming up on the top of the hour, so unless anybody has any final questions, I'll stick around if you guys want to ask any questions at the end, but I think that will be it. So the next focus will be on that May 7th submittal to me to gather your PowerPoint presentation, slide and audio, and also your list of recommendations to be included in the survey. So thank you again for your time and efforts. We appreciate it. We couldn't do it without you. And please let us know if you guys need anything at all. Again, I'll be hanging out for a little bit if you have anything else. Otherwise, we'll be talking to you, probably be sending out reminders early May for those submittals. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the morning and afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wes.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Wes, just let me know when you want me to close the meeting. I think it's just me, you, and fake Lauren there.
Yeah, Lauren's mannequin stand-in or something.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot with my questions at the end, but I just thought maybe it was something you forgot to address. But
No,
I
it's
hear
something
ya.
that I forgot to add into the agenda after it came out, and maybe it just slipped my mind. I did think about the very beginning as I was getting kicked off that I didn't pull up that letter, and I was planning on kind of pulling it up and everything. But yeah, I think between you and I, we talked to Steve. Public Waters was kind of mentioned in that letter. He's like,
Yeah.
that's kind of ridiculous. They're on the committee, they voiced their opinion, and we've got recommendations based on what they've said. So maybe they didn't like all the answers because there's some nuances with public water that you can't just go and turn private property into public property. But,
No, I figured, and that's why I was worried by bringing it up that maybe you guys had decided it wasn't worth, I just didn't want to do a faux pas by mentioning it, but it doesn't sound like that's the case, so that's good.
No, we don't have anything to hide. So, it's something that I plan to Laura and I will probably discuss, hey, how do we want to respond to this now that we've had some time to follow up on it and things like that. So we'll probably do that. I think that you probably find as you work in the public sector, no matter what, you can't make everybody happy. So.
Oh, I'm sure. I can't imagine. And then I had asked earlier, and then I lost track of it, but did you want all the slides to look alike? Are you going to send an example, or don't you care?
I sent an example last time, and I still didn't get them all back looking the same. So,
I didn't really, I didn't look at all of them. I only looked at mine.
And I talked to Lawrence, like, it kind of mixes it up. It doesn't make it seem quite as mundane then if everybody kind of puts their own style to it. So sure, why not have them different? Okay. I don't know if it makes that somebody can say, well, it's not professional enough, but you know what? I'd rather it be interesting than as you sit there and listen to a pre-recorded presentation. It can get mundane sometimes. So.
Sure. No, that sounds good. And just while I've got you, I'm still trying to work on North Aurora. I'm still trying to address some of those issues. And maybe next week I set up are you ready to do face-to-face in the office?
Yeah. I mean, I've met with Arthur face-to-face to discuss some things. I mean, I haven't received my second shot. I'm going in next Tuesday to get it. So, but I'm okay with it. I know you're vaccinated and everything. We're still doing masks. So if you want to meet face-to-face, I'm definitely on board with that.
Well, we'll see. I'm hoping to get a little further along this week, and then when I have questions, then I can just maybe meet with you. And I did drop off some forms for signatures, and I just wanted to let you know for the EET, and I think, Barb's form with all the time off and stuff. It was on my desk.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So no
yeah,
rush.
that's great. If you drop
you know.
stuff off for signature, let me know because, I think it's been a little while, maybe a week or more since I've been in the office. Just how it worked out with, now that I got a kid going to school from 7:30 to 1:30, and I got another one who has physical therapy appointments twice a week, and so it's just with everything going on, it's been a little more difficult to make it in the office. So.
Nope, that's fine.
So yes, if you got stuff waiting for me, I'll try and get to it here soon. I'll definitely be in the office